Get the fuck up. Simon says, get the fuck up. Throw your hands in the sky.
The thing I like to think about for intermediate lifters is kind of when I define like beginner, intermediate, advanced, what I like to think about is, we said this, there's a point where the weight is heavy enough in a lift where your technique starts to break down. Now a novice lifter, they might have their technique break down on a deadlift at like 60 or 70% of their max, but when their adrenaline kicks in, they just pull with crappy technique and they can lift a lot more weight. An advanced lifter would be the opposite. They could only lift their best lift with their technique dialed in. So their technique needs to be on for like 100% of their weight. And I think intermediate is somewhere in between that. So to me, the beginner needs to train the main lift and just master technique. They don't need a lot of fancy exercises. The advanced lifters also kind of come full circle, and they just need to get their technique to be the best it can be, if that's limiting their potential. But the intermediate, their technique is also limited by strengths and imbalances. So you have to have a kind of a focus on lifting heavy enough to kind of lift heavy with the main lifts, but also that's where the supplemental lifts come in to kind of fix the leverage imbalances that maybe are holding them back. So if you say you don't keep your legs loaded at the bottom of a squat, but the person has weak legs and they can't execute that because they're not strong enough, then you need that second exercise that says, well, I'm gonna have you do pauses in the hole so your legs get stronger. It's not enough to just tell them the problem if they can't actually do it. So I like, for intermediate lifters, there's a lot of focus on the strength in these like secondary lifts, and I don't like to have a lot of peaking phases for intermediate lifters, because once you kind of get the weights higher than where the technique breaks down, now you're taking a lot more risk for the reward in the training. So if you take an intermediate lifter and you put them through a strength phase that's mainly like reps, like 6, 5, 4 reps, stuff like that, they do well because their technique can hold up and they can get stronger because it's heavy enough. But once you kind of get into sometimes the singles and doubles, maybe 1 or 2 weeks is all they need to peak, and beyond that, it's like that training is emphasizing technique that's breaking down a lot. So to me, intermediates, they don't need to spend a lot of time in the like the heaviest weights, So whether you train in the percent range that's moderate with higher reps or lower reps, that doesn't really matter so much. That's up to like the philosophy you like. But I think once you train too heavy too much as intermediate, you're losing the focus on technique. And really, I don't think you need that long to peak. You get more strength out of just getting stronger in volume.
And I think he makes a great point about the intermediates with the technique, because when they're doing the heavy singles and the technique's being compromised, they're reinforcing poor technique, which will carry over to the meet. The other thing with an intermediate is, the question was about cycles, and that becomes a very complex question because there's a lot of different methodologies, and we could sit here for 2 days going over all the different methodologies. But the key takeaway I think that Dan's saying, and I would agree with, is regardless of whatever methodology you're using as an intermediate, technique has to be incorporated all year. Good technique all year long to be able to build that. When you become advanced, things can be changed a little bit, moved around a little bit. As a beginner, technique is everything. So the intermediate can start to put in some of the supplemental work Dan was talking about to try to build up weak points, but they're not even gonna know what their weak points are. You just gotta assume everything's weak. But technique is the weak point. Technique's the weak point actually for everybody until they're advanced. And then once you become advanced, your sticking points are determined by what? Where your technique breaks.
Yeah.
So technique's really everything all the way through.